Hello, and welcome back to the Striha Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Parker Striha, and on today's episode, I'm going to be talking through an entire rebuild of the Green Bay Packers. I'm by no means a professional, but I do love talking about sports, so thank you for joining me. Just a quick disclaimer, this is all speculative. This is not what I think will happen, it's just what I would do if I was the general manager of the Packers. This is a rebuild orchestrated entirely by my imagination, so I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers. This is just what I would personally do if I was running the team right now. So I am going to separate this into a couple different parts throughout the same video. I have the current roster, players likely to retire, the 2023 free agents that Green Bay has, and I'm separating that into who I think they should, or who I would re-sign, who I won't re-sign, and who a potential franchise candidate or franchise tag candidate would be. And then I also have a couple cut candidates that I'm going to talk about. And then I do have a couple trades, some draft capital that I'm going to look over, free agents that I would personally look into signing, and then a speculative 2023 draft just based off of their current draft picks and the draft picks that they would be getting out of the trades that I'm going to be talking about. So to start off, we're going to go over the players that I think are likely to retire. Starting off, we have Marcedes Lewis, who is a tight end. He spent the last 5 seasons in Green Bay. He has 57 receptions for 582 yards and 6 touchdowns over those 5 seasons. He's going to be 39 in May, which is extremely old for a tight end in the NFL. But I mean, if he doesn't retire, I would probably re-sign him. He is a really great locker room guy from what I've heard online. Locker room leader. I don't think his number is going to be retired in Green Bay, and I also don't think he's going to be in the Packers Ring of Honor one day, but I do think he was a great addition to Green Bay over the last couple seasons. Next, I have Randall Cobb, who is a wide receiver. He has spent 10 seasons in Green Bay, has 532 receptions for 6,316 yards and 47 touchdowns. He's going to be 33 in August. I'm not exactly sure if he's going to retire, but I've heard a lot of talk that there's a good chance that Week 18 game against Detroit was his last game in the NFL. Another really great locker room guy in Green Bay, one of my favorite players that they've had over the last decade. I don't think he's going to have his number retired in Green Bay, but I do think he will eventually end up in the Packers Ring of Honor. And last but not least, Mason Crosby, who has been Green Bay's kicker for the last 16 seasons. He has made 395 field goals, which is 13th all-time in NFL history, with an 81.4 field goal percentage. He has 733 extra points made, which is 4th all-time, and he has an extra point percentage of 97.3. Like Marcedes Lewis, he is going to be 39, except he'll be 39 in September. But, I mean, kickers can play until really the wheels fall off, so to say. I think Adam Vinatieri played until he was well into his 40s. But you can kind of tell Mason Crosby's leg isn't the same as it used to be. He is definitely kind of showing his age, I think. But he, like those other two guys, is a really big locker room leader for Green Bay. And, I mean, he has had, the way I have it, is ice in his veins. He is one of the most clutch kickers that I've seen. Some of his great game-winning field goals, especially against a team like the Cowboys. You really can't go wrong with talking about him as one of the greatest kickers of all time. For what he's done for Green Bay, he truly is a legend. I don't think his number will ever be retired in Green Bay, but there's definitely a chance when you are one of the team's greatest players of all time, and I do think he will end up in Green Bay's Ring of Honor. So, their 2023 free agents. Like I said, I'm separating this into players I would re-sign, players I wouldn't re-sign, and then a franchise tag candidate. Starting off with the players I would re-sign, Mason Crosby, if he doesn't retire, I would definitely bring him back, as well as Marcedes Lewis. Those guys, like I said, great locker room guys. They're just great people to have in the locker room, on the team, and just in the community. I think everyone loves them. I definitely love watching them play, but they are both on the older side of NFL players. So, I mean, if they don't retire, which is very possible for both of them, I would definitely consider bringing them back. Then I have Josh Nijman, who is an offensive tackle. He's not elite by any means. I don't even know if a lot of people consider him good or great, but I think he's definitely a serviceable offensive tackle for Green Bay. Next, I have Chris Barnes, who, as of right now, is their third string inside linebacker, but I would definitely bring him back. He would be, I think, really cheap, considering he hasn't really, in my opinion, shown a whole lot to where a lot of teams are going to be offering him big money contracts to leave Green Bay. But I mean, he's got to do what he's got to do. If he's going to get money somewhere else, go take it. But I think he is a very valuable piece for that Green Bay defense. Arguably, the most important player that I would re-sign is Keyshawn Nixon, who Green Bay pretty much picked up off the streets this past season, is a cornerback and their kickoff, and I believe punt returner. He actually was 2022 first-team All-Pro, so this is the second season in a row that Green Bay has just signed someone off the street and they ended up being an All-Pro. So, I mean, I think the way he ignited a flame for Green Bay special teams speaks volumes. They really haven't had a solid returner that I can remember, and especially not anyone near the caliber of a first-team All-Pro player. I think he's just too valuable to a special teams unit that has been extremely porous for the last I don't know how many years. So, I mean, if he's not at the top of Green Bay's actual list to re-sign, that's just what I would do. I don't know how much it'll cost to bring him back, but I would do about whatever it takes to get him back. And the last player I would re-sign is Dalen Levitt, a backup safety, just a really solid special teams player. And like Keyshawn Nixon, that unit's been bad. You need as many good players and serviceable players on that unit as you can get in players that you trust, and I think he is one of those players for Green Bay. So the players I would not re-sign, I'm not really going to talk a lot about these guys just because obviously I don't think they're going to be on the team, or I wouldn't keep them on the team, but they are great players. Adrian Amos, the safety, Randall Cobb, wide receiver, Dean Lowry, defensive end, Jaron Reed and Justin Hollins, who are both defensive ends, Jonathan Ford, who is a defensive lineman, Eric Wilson, outside linebacker, Tyler Davis, tight end, and Alan Lazard as wide receiver. I really like a lot of those guys, like Randall Cobb, Adrian Amos. I love Alan Lazard and Jaron Reed, but I just don't think it's worth bringing them back. Green Bay is already going to be in a cap situation that is going to be very tricky to work around, so I just don't think it makes sense to bring these guys back, especially since Amos is going to get a big contract probably from another team. Alan Lazard will get a decent contract from another team. Dean Lowry, Jaron Reed maybe will get decent contracts or bigger contracts than Green Bay could offer them, but I just don't know if the production they provide is worth the amount that they're probably going to be asking for. And then last but not least, my potential franchise tag candidate is tight end Robert Tonyan. The franchise tag for tight ends is about $11.3 million, all guaranteed. So, I mean, that is a hefty price tag for a tight end who by no means had a season this year like we've seen in the past, but he was also coming off of a torn ACL that he suffered later in the 2021 season, I believe. But, I mean, he's one of the better tight ends in the league. I'd say definitely probably a top 10, top 15 guy. So if Green Bay, or in this case me, don't bring him back, if I don't bring him back, I can definitely see him getting a really big contract from another team who wants a starting caliber tight end that they can trust. But we're going to move on to my cut candidates. Starting off, I have Royce Newman, an offensive guard. A lot of the games I've watched him play, he just really hasn't been good. Lets up a lot of pressures, a lot of sacks. I just haven't been impressed with him. And then Rasul Douglas, a cornerback. I don't really know for sure one way or another if I would cut him or not. He's a really solid player, really good last season, but the only reason I think I would cut him is just it saves money. And if you can get him back cheaper or restructure that contract to save money, I would definitely do it, but I just don't know if it makes sense. But if you cut him, or if I cut him in this case, I don't really trust Green Bay's secondary after him, because right now he is, I believe, number 2 or number 3 in that cornerback depth chart. And I mean, the only other guys in that room I trust are Eric Stokes and Jair Alexander. So if you get rid of Rasul Douglas, you got a massive hole to fill for that third corner. So we're going to move to trades that I would do. Now, I'm just going to say these three players that I have getting traded, I absolutely love. They're three of my favorite players in not only the league, but on the team in general. So I would really hate to see these guys go, but trading them saves a lot of money for the team. And I mean, these guys, their value might be as high as it's ever going to get for at least two of these players. So if you can get what you can out of them, I would definitely go for it. So for the first trade, I have the New York Jets receiving quarterback Aaron Rodgers, and the Green Bay Packers receiving a 2023 first-round pick, a 2023 third-round pick, and a 2024 first and fourth-round pick, as well as wide receiver Elijah Moore. Now, I don't know if this feasibly makes a lot of sense just because I don't know all the details with Aaron Rodgers' contract, but I know it is not pretty for Green Bay if he retires, they trade him, or they cut him, or anything. If he is not on the team, it's bad news for Green Bay's cap situation, but recent reports have came out that the Jets are more than willing to offer two or more first-round picks for Aaron Rodgers. So, I mean, if you're Green Bay, I don't know why you wouldn't take that if you can somehow work around that cap situation to where you're not harming the team in a really negative way. But, I mean, you do what you got to do. Those picks could definitely be moved back a year, so 2024 and 2025, because I have seen that if they do trade him, it probably won't be until after June 1st when some of that money gets worked out to where it doesn't harm the team as badly as it would right now. But Elijah Moore, a good piece that would be coming into Green Bay. During the season, reports came out that he had requested a trade from New York. I don't know if they really want to trade him. I think if they did, they would have already. Former second-round pick just a year or two ago, and I really liked him coming out of the draft. I think he's a really good receiver, and I think he would pair well with Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson here in Green Bay. The next trade, I have the Los Angeles Chargers receiving Aaron Jones, with the Green Bay Packers receiving a 2023 second-round pick and a 2024 third-round pick. Now, this is kind of a weird trade. I couldn't really put my finger on what I thought would be an extremely realistic package for a guy like Aaron Jones. I think he's a top 5 running back in the league. I think he's awesome, great as a receiver, great as a running back, but I don't know exactly what his value is. I know the league and teams really don't seem to value running backs like they do a lot of other positions. So, I mean, I kind of looked at the Christian McCaffrey, San Francisco 49ers, Carolina Panthers trade package from this year, and I wasn't exactly sure how similar I could get it just because they're not the same player. I do think McCaffrey is better than Aaron Jones, so I mean, he's going to warrant a greater compensation for the team that is trading him away. But I think the Chargers, yes, they have Austin Eckler, but we've seen over the past couple seasons at least that he is not an every down guy. He is not a guy you can give 20 to 25 carries to every game and trust that he's going to stay healthy. And I mean, Aaron Jones, while he has kind of had a little bit of an injury history over the last 2 years, you can give him those carries and you know he's going to produce, you know he's going to stay on the field. And that just provides the Chargers with a piece that they don't currently have with Austin Eckler. I think it would be an instant improvement, and they can trade Eckler. They could probably throw Eckler in this trade if they really wanted to, or ship him out somewhere and get more picks in return. And the last pick, I have the Green Bay Packers receiving a 2023 fourth-round pick and a conditional 2024 second-round pick. And then the Kansas City Chiefs receiving David Bakhtiari and a 2024 sixth. This is another really weird trade to kind of work around because Bakhtiari, he was out for a very long time with that ACL injury, and he was also hit or miss this year whether he'd be available to play or not. But if you're a team like Kansas City, you're probably going to lose Orlando Brown Jr. this free agency, whether you really want to or not. I don't think they really care that much, other than the fact that he would leave a massive hole at left tackle. But I don't know why, if he becomes available, why you wouldn't take a shot at David Bakhtiari, one of the best left tackles of the last 10 or 15 years since he came into the league. He's been a premier offensive lineman. And I mean, for a time was considered a number 1 or number 2 left tackle in the entire league. Bring him to the team, let him protect Patrick Mahomes, and that just extends that Super Bowl window that, I mean, really isn't shrinking, but you got to extend that for as long as you can. Keep that offensive line strong, and then you can keep Patrick Mahomes on his feet. That's pretty much really all there is to it. So then for draft capital over the next 2 drafts, that means Green Bay would have in 2023, Green Bay would have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, 2 third-round picks, 2 fourth-round picks, a 5th, a 6th, and a 7th-round pick, and then any compensatory picks that they would get for losing free agents. And then in 2024, Green Bay would have 2 to 3 first-round picks, depending on that conditional second in the David Bakhtiari trade, and then 1 to 2 second-round picks, also depending on that trade. 2 thirds, 2 fourths, a 5th, and a 7th, and then any compensatory picks. So they would have a very, very solid selection of picks that they could use to really improve that roster. Okay, so then I did go through offensive and defensive positions and kind of just looked at a couple guys that I would consider bringing in if I'm Green Bay, or who I would bring in if I was the general manager. Whether these are guys that looking for a new home, or you think that you really think could thrive in this system and become really solid players in the NFL. So for quarterback, I have Gardner Minshew, who is currently on the Philadelphia Eagles, and Joe Flacco, who is currently on the New York Jets. Now, neither of them are going to be your franchise guy, but I mean, if you have Gardner Minshew come in, he can provide really solid competition for a guy like Jordan Love. And then Joe Flacco is another guy, sort of like Aaron Rodgers, who can come in, has won a Super Bowl, and can really teach Jordan Love, or whoever your franchise guy, some very valuable lessons. Running backs, I have James Robinson, also from the New York Jets, and Kenyon Drake from the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I really only think these 2 moves, or one of these 2 moves, would make sense if they trade Aaron Jones. If they don't trade him, then I think both of these players, or really any bigger name free agent running backs, are kind of off the table. But if you trade Aaron Jones, these guys could come in and provide a very valuable depth or rotational piece along with their current running back, A.J. Dillon. Wide receiver, I have Demarcus Robinson from the Baltimore Ravens and Greg Dortch from the Arizona Cardinals. Both, I think, are really solid receivers. I don't know what their market is going to be exactly, because I don't really think either of them have shown enough to warrant big contracts. So I can see Green Bay throwing out a cheap 1 or 2 year deal just to kind of see what they have. And then tight end, I have Donald Parham Jr. from the Los Angeles Chargers and Dan Arnold from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Arnold was a really solid tight end a couple years ago for, I believe, the Cardinals, before going to Carolina and now Jacksonville. And I mean, Parham is he's 6'7" or 6'8", so he is a really big body, and we really haven't seen a lot from him. So I wouldn't mind bringing him into the team, letting him be the starting tight end, and just seeing what you have with him. It can be a cheap deal, so that way it's a high risk, or a low risk, high reward situation, because if he's good, you can sign him back. If not, then you really didn't give up a lot of money to bring a guy like him in. For the offensive line, I have Billy Turner from the Denver Broncos and Billy Price from the Arizona Cardinals. Price can come in, provide competition for Josh Myers as the starting center, or he can probably slide over to guard. Was a first-round pick a couple years ago, hasn't really lived up to the bill of being that first-round pick. And then Billy Turner was on the team last year, I believe, before being cut as a cap casualty. Has familiarity with Matt LaFleur and that current coaching staff. So he would also come in and could be a starter at really any position on that offensive line other than center. Defensive line, I have Isaac Rochelle from the Las Vegas Raiders and Solomon Thomas from the New York Jets. Now, Rochelle is a defensive end, and I think he fits more in a 4-3, but I think he could definitely play a 3-4 defensive end, get down on that line. And I think he's by no means a an elite player, but I do really like him. I think he's a really good defensive lineman. And like I said, he's going to be cheap. Like a lot of these guys on this list are going to be cheap. Solomon Thomas, a former, I believe, number 3 overall pick in 2017 or 2018, hasn't really lived up to being that number 3 overall pick. So he might be a cheaper guy that you can bring in and just see if you can kind of rejuvenate his career. For linebacker, I have Andrew Van Ginkel from the Miami Dolphins and O'Shane Ximines from the Giants. Both of these guys would come in and be predominantly just pass rushers to go along with Kingsley Enagbare and Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith. Just see what you got. They're both going to be cheap. Neither of them have really been an elite or even like a top 30, 32 pass rusher in the league, in my opinion. So bring them in, see what you got. Like with a lot of these guys, it's a low-risk, high-reward scenario. And then cornerback, I have Amani Oruwariye from the Detroit Lions and Jason Verrett from the San Francisco 49ers. Like I said, 2 more guys that are going to be cheap, but see what they have. Oruwariye was really solid for the Lions last year and kind of took a step back this year, but you can bring him in, and he is going to provide a really solid third corner for Green Bay, especially if they cut a guy like Rasul Douglas. And then at safety, I have Jabril Peppers from the New England Patriots and Keanu Neal from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Peppers, coming out of the draft a couple years ago, was a really highly touted defensive player. I mean, he was a freak in college, so I would love Green Bay to bring him in. He can play a linebacker. He can play strong safety. He can kind of be a puzzle piece on that defense that you can kind of just put him wherever you need him, and he's going to thrive as long as he's healthy, but I think that's kind of a hit or miss at the moment. So now moving into the 2023 draft, this is what I would do if I had all the picks from those trades. Now, I did run this through a mock draft simulator to kind of get an idea for who would be available at these picks. I'm not really going to provide a lot of analysis on any of these guys. I'll just kind of explain why I would pick them and then move on. So, in round 1, pick 13, I would select Bijan Robinson, a running back from Texas. Running back isn't an extremely valuable position in the league, but if you can get arguably the best prospect since Saquon Barkley to replace Aaron Jones, I don't think you can go wrong there. Round 1, pick 15, I have them selecting Broderick Jones, an offensive tackle from Georgia. If you lose David Bakhtiari via trade or release or retirement or something, bring him in, can be a starter right away on that left side of the line. Round 2, pick 46, I have them selecting Darnell Washington, a tight end from Georgia. He's basically an extra lineman. The guy's 6'7", 270 pounds, and he's still only getting better. You lose Robert Tonyan, get this guy in there. Even if you sign Donald Parham, how is the defense going to cover a 6'7" and a 6'8" tight end that are on the field at the same time? Round 2, pick 55, I have them selecting Brandon Jones, a safety from Notre Dame. If you lose Adrian Amos, bring Brandon Jones in. He can be a starter right away. Round 3, pick 75, Xavier Hutchinson, wide receiver from Iowa State. Get that wide receiver room even younger, bring in more guys that can develop and potentially become a solid role players for that team. Round 3, pick 79, Jaquelin Roy, a defensive tackle from LSU. Bring him in, improve that defensive line depth that is very, very not great at the moment outside of Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt. Round 4, pick 116, DeMarvion Overshone, a linebacker from Texas. Can never have too many solid inside linebackers because you never know when an injury is going to happen. Round 5, pick 150, Jackson Kirkland, an offensive tackle from Washington. Can play tackle, can play guard, just provides really good depth on that line. Round 7, pick 234, Darius Rush, cornerback from South Carolina. Doesn't hurt to have decent depth. Round 7, pick 244, Jalen Cropper, a wide receiver from Fresno State. Like with a lot of these guys, bring him in, see if you can develop him, and if you can, then you have a really solid player on a very cheap contract. And then lastly, round 7, pick 259, Brent Lang, an offensive tackle from Minnesota State University Duluth. Just another depth piece that could develop into something. So, looking at those draft picks and the potential free agent market and the current roster, these are just my projected starters for the 2023-2024 season if these moves that I am hypothetically making were actually made. So at quarterback, we'd be starting Jordan Love, running back, Bijan Robinson, wide receiver would be Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, tight end would be Darnell Washington, offensive tackle, our left tackle all the way to right tackle would be Broderick Jones, Elton Jenkins, Josh Myers, John Runyon Jr., and Zach Tom. And then on the defensive line, you'd have Devontae Wyatt, Kenny Clark, and TJ Slayton. Linebackers, you'd have Preston Smith and Rashawn Gary off the edge. And on the inside, you'd have Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker. Cornerbacks, you would have Jair Alexander and Eric Stokes. And then at safety, you would have Darnell Savage and Brandon Joseph. Now, like I said earlier, this is just what I would do if I was the GM. I don't think any of these are really going to happen. I mean, some of the draft picks may happen if those players are available at Green Bay's picks that they have at the moment. But like I said, this is just what I would do. Green Bay's kind of in a tricky situation right now, but I think this could provide for maybe not a great team in 2023, but definitely very entertaining. But as always, I am your host, Parker Striha, and this has been the Striha Sports Podcast. Our random sport fact of the day is that the Green Bay Packers were founded in 1919. As always, thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for whenever a new video gets posted.